White Cobra present Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, adapted and directed by Rebecca Cockcroft. Episode 4. All Meryton seemed striving to blacken the name of Wickham. He was declared to be in debt to every tradesman, and his intrigues, all honoured with the title of seduction, had been extended into every tradesman's family. Everybody declared that he was the wickedest young man in the world. On Saturday, Mr Bennet returned to Longbourn, much to the displeasure of his wife.
What? Are you come home without poor Lydia? Mr Bennet! Who is to fight Wickham and make him marry her? If you have come away...
I have yielded to your brother's request to return home to you, Mrs Bennet. He will continue our pursuit in town.
Have you or my uncle discovered any more of Wickham, Papa?
A great deal, and not a bit of it pleasant. It is not known of a single relation with whom he has kept up any connection, and he does not appear to be in terms of particular friendship with former acquaintances. It has transpired that he left gaming debt behind him to a very considerable amount. Indeed, Colonel Forster believes that more than £1,000 would be necessary to clear his expenses in Brighton alone, and he owed a great deal more in town.
Oh, I am sorry, Papa, for all that you must have endured.
Say nothing of that. Who should suffer but myself? It has been my own doing, and I ought to feel it.
You must not be too severe upon yourself.
Lizzy, let me once in my life feel how much I have been to blame. It will pass away soon enough.
Do you suppose them to be in London still?
Yes. Where else can they be so well concealed? Lizzy, I bear you no ill will for being justified in your advice to me last May, which, considering the event, shows some greatness of mind. I will sit in my library, in my nightcap, and give as much trouble as I can. Perhaps I may defer it till Kitty runs away.
I am not going to run away, Papa. If I should ever go to Brighton, I would behave better than Lydia.
You go to Brighton? I would not trust you so near it as Eastbourne for £50. No, Kitty, I have at last learned to be cautious, and you will feel the effects of it. No officer is ever to enter my house again. Balls will be absolutely prohibited unless you stand up with one of your sisters. And you are never to stir out of doors till you can prove that you have spent 10 minutes of every day in a rational manner. Well, do not make yourself unhappy. If you're a good girl for the next 10 years, I will take you to a review at the end of them. Jane? Lizzy? I have had a letter by express.
And what news does it bring? Good or bad?
What is there of good to be expected? But perhaps you would like to read it. Read it aloud, for I hardly know myself what it is about.
My dear brother, soon after you left me on Saturday, I was fortunate enough to find out in what part of London they were. I have seen them both.
Oh, then it is what I had always hoped. They are married.
They are not married.
Oh.
Nor can I find there was any intention of being so. But if you are willing to perform the engagements which I have ventured to make on your side, I hope it will not be long before they are. All that is required of you is to assure your daughter by settlement her equal share of the £5,000 secured among your children after the decease of yourself and my sister, and moreover, allow her during your life £100 per annum. You will easily comprehend from these particulars that Mr Wickham's circumstances are not so hopeless as they were generally believed to be.
Oh, Papa, that is some good at least.
We have judged it best that my niece should be married from this house, of which I hope you will approve. I shall write again as soon as anything more is determined on. Yours, etc., Edward Gardiner. Is it possible? Can it be possible that he will marry her?
Wickham is not so undeserving then as we thought him.
And may I ask, the terms, I suppose, must be complied with?
Complied with? I'm only ashamed of his asking so little.
And they must marry. Yet he is such a man.
Yes, they must marry. There is nothing else to be done. But there are two things that I want very much to know. One is how much money your uncle has laid down to bring it about. And the other, how am I ever to pay him?
Money? My uncle? What do you mean, sir?
I mean that no man in his senses would marry Lydia on so slight a temptation as 100 a year. Wickham's a fool if he takes her with a farthing less than £10,000.
£10,000? Heaven forbid! How is half such a sum to be repaid?
I'm going to my library, girls. I would appreciate not being disturbed.
And they are really to be married. And for this we are to be thankful.
Well, I comfort myself with thinking that he certainly would not marry Lydia if he had not a real regard for her. I cannot believe that £10,000 or anything like it has been advanced. How could our uncle spare half the amount?
The kindness of my uncle and aunt can never be requited.
We must endeavour to forget all that has passed on either side.
Their conduct has been such as neither you, nor I, nor anybody can ever forget. It is useless to talk of it.
You've heard the news. Oh, my dear, dear Lydia. Oh, this is delightful indeed. She will be married. Oh, and at just 16. Oh, my good, kind brother. I knew how it would be. I knew he would manage everything. Oh, how I long to see her. And to see dear Wickham too. But the clothes, the wedding clothes. Oh, I will write to my sister Gardiner about them directly. Lizzy, my dear, run to your father and ask him how much he will give her. No, stay. I will go myself. Oh, my dear, dear Lydia. Oh, how merry we shall be together when we meet.
A few days following the much-anticipated wedding, the family were assembled in the breakfast room ready to receive the newlyweds, despite Mr Bennet's determination that they should never be welcomed to Longbourn.
Lizzy, I never gave you an account of my wedding. Are you not curious to hear how it was managed?
Not really. I think there cannot be too little said on the subject.
Lord, you are so strange. But I must tell you how it went off. We were married, at St Clement's, because Wickham's lodgings were in that parish. Well, and so we breakfasted at 10 as usual. I thought it would never be over, for by the by, you were to understand that my uncle and aunt were horrid unpleasant all the time I was with them. If you'll believe me, I did not once put my foot out of doors, though I was there a fortnight. Not one party or scheme or anything. Well, and so just as the carriage came to the door, my uncle was called away on business. I was so frightened, I didn't know what to do, for my uncle was to give me away, and if we were beyond the hour, we could not be married all day. But, luckily, he came back again in 10 minutes' time, and then we all set out. However, I recollected afterwards that if he had been prevented going, the wedding need not be put off, for Mr Darcy might have done as well.
Mr Darcy?
Oh, yes, he was to come there with Wickham, Oh, but gracious me, I quite forgot. I ought not to have said a word about it. Oh, and I promised them so faithfully. What will Wickham say? It was all to be such a secret. Oh, do not ask me, Lizzy, for then I would tell you all, and Wickham would be angry.
Elizabeth promised to never mention it to Wickham, but to live in ignorance on such a point was impossible, or at least it was impossible not to try for information. She could not bear such suspense, and hastily seizing a sheet of paper, wrote a short letter to her aunt.
You may readily comprehend what my curiosity must be, to know how a person unconnected with any of us should have been amongst you at such a time. Pray, write instantly, and let me understand it, unless it is, for very cogent reasons, to remain in the secrecy which Lydia seems to think necessary, and then I must endeavour to be satisfied with ignorance. Not that I shall, though. And my dear aunt, if you do not tell me in an honourable manner, I shall certainly be reduced to tricks and stratagems to find it out.
Her aunt's reply was eagerly awaited, and no sooner was Elizabeth in possession of it than, hurrying into the little copse where she was least likely to be interrupted, she sat down on one of the benches and began reading at once.
Not long after your father returned to Longbourn, Mr Darcy called on your uncle. From what I can collect, he left Derbyshire only one day after ourselves and came to town with the resolution of hunting for your sister and Mr Wickham. There is a lady, it seems, a Mrs Young, who was some time ago governess to Miss Darcy, and was dismissed from her charge on some cause of disapprobation, though he did not say what.
Yes, I know of her disapprobation, Aunt.
Wickham indeed had gone to her on their arrival in London. Mr Darcy saw Wickham, and afterwards insisted on seeing Lydia, and it only remained, he thought, to secure and expedite a marriage, which he easily learned had never been Mr Wickham's design. In fact, Wickham still cherished the hope of more effectually making his fortune by marriage in some other country.
That does not surprise me.
I fancy, Lizzy, that obstinacy is the real defect of Mr Darcy's character. Nothing was to be done that he did not do himself. You know pretty well, I suppose, what has been done for the young people. His debts are to be paid, amounting to considerably more than £1,000, another 1,000 in addition to her own settled upon her, and his commission purchased. The reason why all of this was to be done by Mr Darcy alone was owing to him having allowed Wickham's character to have been so misunderstood. But my dear Lizzy, you may rest perfectly assured that your uncle would have never yielded if we had not given him credit for another interest in that affair.
I cannot take credit for any of Mr Darcy's actions, not after my behaviour in Kent. I will not believe it.
Will you be very angry with me, my dear Lizzy, if I take this opportunity of saying how much I like him? Pray forgive me if I have been very presuming, or at least do not punish me so far as to exclude me from Pemberley. I shall never be quite happy till I have been all round the park. A low phaeton with a nice little pair of ponies would be the very thing.
I'm afraid I interrupt your solitary time, my dear sister.
Mr Wickham, you certainly do, but it does not follow that the interruption must be unwelcome.
I should be very sorry indeed if it were. We were always good friends, and now we are better. And so, my dear sister, I find from our uncle and aunt that you have actually seen Pemberley.
I have.
I most envy you the pleasure. And you saw the old housekeeper, I suppose? Poor Reynolds. She was always very fond of me. But of course she did not mention my name to you.
Yes, she did. She said that you were gone into the army, and that she was afraid had not turned out well. At such a distance as that, you know, things are strangely misrepresented.
Certainly. I was surprised to see Darcy in town last month. We passed each other several times. I wonder what he could be doing there.
Perhaps preparing for his marriage with Mr Berg. It must be something particular to take him there at this time of the year.
Oh, undoubtedly. Did you see him while you were in Derbyshire? I thought I understood from the gardeners that you had.
Yes. He introduced us to his sister.
And do you much like her?
Very much.
I have heard, indeed, that she is uncommonly improved within this year or two. When I last saw her, she was not very promising. I'm very glad you liked her. I hope she'll turn out well.
I dare say she will. She has got over the most trying age.
And Mr Darcy himself? I doubt you found much altered since you saw him in Kent.
I have found that Mr Darcy improves on acquaintance.
Indeed. And pray, may I ask, is it in address that he improves? For I dare not hope that he is improved in essentials.
In essentials, I believe, he is very much what he ever was. I did not mean that his mind or his manners were in a state of improvement, but that from knowing him better, his disposition was better understood.
Did you go by the village of Kimpton?
I do not recollect that we did.
I mention it because it is the living which I ought to have had. A most delightful place. Excellent parsonage house. It would have suited me in every respect.
How should you have liked making sermons?
Exceedingly well. But it was not to be. Did you ever hear Mr Darcy mention the circumstance?
I have heard from authority, which I thought as good, that it was left you conditionally only, and at the will of the present patron.
You have? Yes, there was something in that. I told you so from the first. You may remember.
I did hear, too, that there was a time when sermon-making was not so palatable to you as it seems to be at present.
You did? And it was not wholly without foundation? You may remember what I told you on that point when we first talked of it.
Come, Mr. Wickham, we are brother and sister, you know. Do not let us quarrel about the past. In future, I hope we shall be always of one mind.
The day of Wickham and Lydia's departure soon came, and Mrs. Bennet was forced to submit to a separation, which, as her husband by no means entered into her scheme of their all going to Newcastle, was likely to continue for some time.
Oh, my dear Lydia, when shall we meet again?
Oh, Lord, I don't know. Not these 2-3 years, perhaps.
Write to me very often, my dear.
As often as I can. But you know, married women never have much time for writing. My sisters may write to me. They will have nothing else to do. Goodbye, Mamma.
I often think that there is nothing so bad as parting with one's children. One seems so forlorn without them.
This is the consequence, you see, madam, of marrying a daughter. It must make you better satisfied that your other 4 are single.
It is no such thing. Lydia does not leave me because she is married, but because her husband's regiment happens to be so far off.
But the spiritless condition which this event threw her into was shortly relieved, and her mind opened again to the agitation of hope by an article of news which then began to be in circulation.
Well, and so Mr Bingley is coming down, Lizzy. Not that I care about it, though. He's nothing to us, you know, and I'm sure I will never want to see him again. But however, he is very welcome to come to Netherfield, if he likes it. And who knows what may happen? But that is nothing to us. And so, is it quite certain that he's coming? As soon as ever Mr Bingley comes, my dear Mr Bennet, you will wait on him, of course.
No. You forced me into visiting him last year and promised, if I went to see him, he should marry one of my daughters. But it ended in nothing, and I will not be sent on a fool's errand again. If he wants our society, let him seek it. He knows where we live.
Well, all I know is that it will be abominably rude if you do not wait on him. But however, that shan't prevent my asking him to dine here. I am determined. We must have Mrs Long and the Gouldings soon. That will make 13 with ourselves, so there
Oh,
will be
Lizzy,
just room at the
I begin to be
table
sorry
for
that he comes at all. I could see him with perfect indifference, but I can hardly bear to hear it thus perpetually talked of. Happy shall I be when his stay at Netherfield is over.
On the 3rd morning after Mr Bingley's arrival in Hertfordshire, Mrs Bennet saw him from the drawing-room window enter the paddock and ride towards the house.
Girls! Mr Bingley is come! Make yourselves ready!
There is a gentleman with him, Mamma. Who can it be?
Some acquaintance or other, my dear, I suppose. I'm sure I do not know.
Lord, it looks just like that man that used to be with him before. Mr... what's his name? That tall, proud man.
Oh, good gracious. Mr Darcy. So it does, I vow. Well, any friend of Mr Bingley's will always be welcome here, to be sure. But else I must say that I hate the very sight of him.
Mr Bingley and Mr Darcy, ma'am.
Sirs, you are most welcome to Longbourn. Mr Bingley, you are well, I hope?
Quite well, thank you, Mrs Bennet.
And you too, Mr Darcy?
Yes, thank you. Your brother, Mr Gardiner, and his wife are in good health?
I believe so.
How is your sister, Mr Darcy?
She's very well, thank you.
It is a long time, Mr Bingley, since you went away.
Oh, it has been indeed, and...
I began to be afraid you would never come back again. People did say that you meant to quit the place entirely at Michaelmas, but however, I hope it is not true. A great many changes have happened in the neighbourhood since you went away. Miss Lucas is married and settled, and one of my own daughters. I suppose you have heard it. Indeed, you must have seen it in the papers. It was in the Times and the Courier, I know, though it was not put in as it ought to be. It was only said, lately George Wickham, Esquire, to Miss Lydia Bennet, without there being a syllable said of her father, or the place where she lived, or anything. Did you see it?
I did. Please accept my congratulations.
Oh, it is a delightful thing, to be sure, to have a daughter well married. But at the same time, Mr Bingley, it is very hard to have her taken such away from me. They are gone down to Newcastle, and there they are to stay. I do not know how long. His regiment is there, for I suppose you have heard of his being gone into the regulars? Well, thank heaven he has some friends, though perhaps not as many as he deserves. Do you mean to stay long in the country, Mr Bingley?
Well, a few weeks at present, for the shooting.
Well, when you have killed all your own birds, Mr Bingley, I beg you will come here and shoot as many as you please on Mr Bennet's manor. I'm sure he will be vastly happy to oblige you.
Oh, well, that is most kind, Mrs Bennet.
You are quite a visit in my debt, Mr Bingley, for when you went to town last winter. You promised to take a family dinner with us as soon as you returned. I have not forgotten, you see, and I assure you I was very much disappointed that you did not come back and keep your engagement.
Ah, well, I was prevented by business.
But you will join us on Tuesday, then?
Oh, indeed, I shall be delighted.
On Tuesday there was a large party assembled at Longbourn for dinner. Bingley's behaviour towards Jane was such as showed an admiration of her, which, though more guarded than formerly, persuaded Elizabeth that if left wholly to himself, Jane's happiness and his own would be speedily secured. Elizabeth longed to speak to Mr Darcy. Her eyes followed him around the room, and she envied everyone to whom he spoke.
Well, girls, what say you to the day? I think everything has passed off uncommonly well, I assure you. Oh, and my dear Jane, I never saw you look in greater beauty. Mrs Long said so too, for I asked her whether you did not. And what do you think she said besides? Ah, Mrs Bennet, we shall have her at Netherfield at last. She did, indeed. Oh, I do think Mrs Long is as good a creature as ever lived. And her nieces are very pretty behaved girls, and not at all handsome. I like them prodigiously.
It has been a very agreeable day. The party seems so well selected, so suitable one with the other. I hope we may often meet again.
I am sure you do hope.
Lizzy, you must not suspect me. I assure you that I have now learnt to enjoy his conversation as an agreeable and sensible young man without having a wish beyond it. It is only that he is blessed with greater sweetness of address than any other man.
You are very cruel. You will not let me smile, and are provoking me to it every moment.
Oh, my dear Lizzy, you cannot think me so weak as to be in danger now.
I think you are in very great danger of making him as much in love with you as ever.
A few days after this visit, Mr Bingley called again, and alone. Mr Darcy had business to attend to in town, something which came as somewhat of a relief to Elizabeth, having spent too long dwelling anxiously on his grave and indifferent behaviour towards her at dinner.
My dear Jane, make haste and hurry down. He is come. He is indeed. Make haste, make haste. Here, Sarah, come to Miss Bennet this moment and help her on with her gown. Oh, never mind Miss Lizzie's hair.
We will be down as soon as we can, but I dare say Kitty is forwarder than either of us, for she went upstairs half an hour ago.
Oh, hang Kitty. What has she got to do with it? Oh, come, be quick, be quick. Where's your sash, my dear?
Mrs Bennet's same anxiety to get Jane and Bingley by themselves was evident after breakfast. Mr Bennet retired to the library, as was his custom, and Mary went upstairs to read in peace. 2 obstacles of the 5 being thus removed, Mrs Bennet sat looking and winking at Elizabeth and Kitty for a considerable time, without making any impression on them.
What is the matter, Mamma? What do you keep winking at me for? What am I to do?
Nothing, child. Nothing. I did not wink at you. Oh, but Kitty, come here, my love. I want to speak to you. Lizzy, my dear, I want to speak with you too.
I beg your pardon, Mr Bingley.
Oh, no, not at all.
We may as well leave them by themselves, you know. Kitty and I are going upstairs to sit in my dressing room.
Elizabeth made no attempt to reason with her mother, but remained quietly in the hall. On opening the door a few moments later, she saw her sister and Bingley standing together over the hearth, and had this led to no suspicion, the faces of both, as they hastily turned round and moved away from each other, would have told it all. Bingley whispered a few words to her sister and ran out of the room.
Oh, Lizzy. Oh, it is too much. It's by far too much. I do not deserve it. Oh, why is not everybody as happy?
My dear, dear Jane, this day is finally come at last.
He has gone to Papa already for his consent. Oh, Lizzy, to know that what I have to relate will give such pleasure to all my dear family. Oh, how shall I bear so much happiness?
I have not a doubt of your doing very well together. You are each of you so complying that nothing will ever be resolved on, so easy that every servant will cheat you, and so generous that you will always exceed your income.
Exceed their income? My dear Mr Bennet, what are you talking of? Why, he has 4,000 or 5,000 a year, and very likely more. Oh, my dear, dear Jane, I was so sure you could not be so beautiful for nothing.
He's made me so happy, Lizzy. Oh, would you believe that he was totally ignorant of my being in town last spring?
I suspected as much, but how did he account for it?
Oh, it must have been his sister's doing. There were certainly no friends to his acquaintance with me, or which I cannot wonder at, since he might have chosen so much more advantageously in many respects.
That is the most unforgiving speech that I ever heard you utter. Good girl.
Would you really believe it, Lizzy, that when he went to town last November, he really loved me? And nothing but a persuasion of my being indifferent would have prevented his coming down again.
He made a little mistake, to be sure, but it is to the credit of his modesty.
I am certainly the most fortunate creature that ever existed. Oh, Lizzy, if I could but see you as happy, if there were but such another man for you.
If you were to give me 40 such men, I never could be so happy as you. Till I have your disposition, your goodness, I never can have your happiness. But, perhaps, if I have very good luck, I may meet with another Mr Collins in time.
Lady Catherine de Bourgh, ma'am, for Miss Elizabeth.
I hope you are well, Miss Bennet. That lady, I suppose, is your mother.
Yes, madam.
And that, I suppose, is one of your sisters.
Yes, madam. She is my youngest girl but one. My youngest of all is lately married.
You have a very small park here.
It is nothing in comparison to Rosings Park, my lady, I dare say. But I assure you it is much larger than Sir William Lucas's.
This must be a most inconvenient sitting-room for the evening in summer. The windows are full west.
We never sit in here after dinner, madam.
Yes, very well. Miss Bennet, there seemed to be a prettyish kind of a little wilderness on one side of your lawn. I should be glad to take a turn in it, if you will favour me with your company. You can be at no loss, Miss Bennet, to understand the reason of my journey hither.
Indeed, you are mistaken, madam. I have not been at all able to account for the honour of seeing you here.
A report of a most alarming nature reached me 2 days ago. I was told that not only was your sister on the point of being most advantageously married, but that Miss Elizabeth Bennet, would in all likelihood be soon afterwards united to my nephew, Mr Darcy. Though I know it must be a scandalous falsehood, I instantly resolved on setting off for this place, that I might make my sentiments known to you.
If you believed it impossible to be true, I wonder you took the trouble of coming so far. Your coming to Longbourn to see me and my family will be rather a confirmation of it, if, indeed, such a report is in existence.
If? Do you then pretend to be ignorant of it? Has it not been industriously circulated by yourselves? And can you likewise declare that there is no foundation for it?
I do not pretend to possess equal frankness with your ladyship. You may ask questions which I shall not choose to answer.
This is not to be borne, Miss Bennet. I insist on being satisfied. Has my nephew made you an offer of marriage?
Your ladyship has declared it to be impossible.
It ought to be so, but you may have drawn him in.
If I have, I shall be the last person to confess it.
Miss Bennet, do you know who I am? I have not been accustomed to such language as this. I am almost the nearest relation he has in the world, and I am entitled to know all his dearest concerns.
But you are not entitled to know mine, nor will such behaviour as this ever induce me to be explicit.
This match, to which you have the presumption to aspire, can never take place. Mr Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Now what have you to say?
Only this, that if he is so, you can have no reason to suppose he will make an offer to me.
The engagement between them is of a peculiar kind. From their infancy they have been intended for each other. It was the favourite wish of his mother. Have you not heard me say that from his earliest hours he was destined for his cousin?
Yes, and I had heard it before. But what is that to me? If Mr Darcy is neither by honour nor inclination confined to his cousin, why is not he to make another choice? And if I am that choice, why may not I accept him?
Obstinate, headstrong girl! I am ashamed of you. My daughter and my nephew are formed for each other, and what is to divide them? The upstart pretensions of a young woman without family connections or fortune. Is this to be endured? If you were sensible of your own good, you would not wish to quit the sphere in which you have been brought up.
He is a gentleman. I am a gentleman's daughter. So far, we are equal.
True, you are a gentleman's daughter. But who is your mother? Who are your uncles and aunts? Do not imagine me ignorant of their condition.
Whatever my connections may be, if your nephew does not object to them, they can be nothing to you.
Tell me, once and for all, are you engaged to him?
I am not.
And will you promise me never to enter into such an engagement?
I will make no promise of the kind.
Miss Bennet, I am shocked and astonished. I expected to find a more reasonable young woman. I shall not go away till you have given me the assurance I require.
And I certainly never shall give it. I'm not to be intimidated into anything so wholly unreasonable. You have widely mistaken my character if you think I can be worked on by such persuasions as these. How far your nephew might approve of your interference in his affairs, I cannot tell. But you have certainly no right to concern yourself in mine. I must beg, therefore, to be importuned no further on the subject.
Not so hasty, if you please. I have by no means done. To all the objections I have already urged, I have still another to add. I am no stranger to the particulars of your younger sister's infamous elopement. I know it all, that the young man's marrying her was a patched-up business at the expense of your father and uncles. And is such a girl to be my nephew's sister? Oh, heaven and earth! Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted?
You can now have nothing further to say. You have insulted me in every possible method. I must beg to return to the house.
You have no regard, then, for the honour and credit of my nephew. Unfeeling, selfish girl! Do you not consider that a connection with you must disgrace him in the eyes of everybody?
Lady Catherine, I have nothing further to say.
You are then resolved to have him?
I have said no such thing. I am only resolved to act in that manner which will, in my own opinion, constitute my happiness without reference to you, or to any person so wholly unconnected with me.
And this is your real opinion? This is your final resolve? Very well. I take no leave of you, Miss Bennet. I send no compliments to your mother. You deserve no such attention. I am most seriously displeased.
Lizzy, I was just going to look for you. I have received a letter this morning that has astonished me exceedingly. As it principally concerns yourself, you ought to know its contents. I did not know before that I had 2 daughters on the brink of matrimony. Oh, come in, my library child. Let me congratulate you on a very important conquest. This letter is from Mr. Collins.
From Mr. Collins? And what can he have to say?
Something very much to the purpose, of course. Oh, he begins with congratulations on the approaching nuptials of my eldest daughter. I shall not sport with your impatience by reading what he says on that point. What relates to yourself is as follows. Your daughter Elizabeth, it is presumed, will not long bear the name of Bennet after her elder sister has resigned it, and the chosen partner of her fate may be reasonably looked up to as one of the most illustrious personages in this land. Can you possibly guess, Lizzy, who is meant by this? But now it comes out. My motive for cautioning you is as follows. We have reason to imagine that his aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, does not look on the match with a friendly eye. Mr. Darcy, you see, is the man. Oh, now, Lizzy, I think I have surprised you. Mr. Darcy, who never looks at any woman but to see a blemish, and who probably never looked at you in his life. Oh, it is admirable.
Oh.
Are you not diverted?
Oh, yes.
Oh, but Lizzy, you look as if you did not enjoy it.
Oh, I am excessively diverted. But it is so strange.
Yes, that is what makes it amusing. If they fixed on any other man, it would have been nothing. But his perfect indifference and your pointed dislike make it so delightfully absurd. Oh, and pray, Lizzy, what said Lady Catherine about this report? Did she call to refuse her consent?
Mr Bingley brought Darcy with him to Longbourn before many days had passed since Lady Catherine's visit. Bingley, who wanted to be alone with Jane, proposed their all walking out. Mrs Bennet was not in the habit of walking. Mary could never spare time, but the remaining 5 set off together. Kitty ran on ahead to call on Maria, and as Jane and Bingley allowed the others to outstrip them, Elizabeth took the opportunity of a moment of confidence to speak to Mr Darcy.
I can no longer help thanking you for your unexampled kindness to my poor sister. Ever since I have known it, I have been most anxious to acknowledge to you how gratefully I feel it. Were it known to the rest of my family, I should not merely have my own gratitude to express.
I'm exceedingly sorry that you'd ever been informed of what may, in a mistaken light, have given you uneasiness. I did not think Mrs. Gardiner was so little to be trusted.
You must not blame my aunt. Lydia's thoughtlessness first betrayed to me that you had been concerned in the matter, and, Of course, I could not rest till I knew the particulars. Let me thank you again, and again, in the name of all my family, for that generous compassion which induced you to take so much trouble and bear so many mortifications for the sake of discovering them.
If you will thank me, let it be for yourself alone. Your family owe me nothing. Much as I respect them, I believe I thought only of you. You are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on this subject forever.
Mr. Darcy, my feelings have undergone so material a change since the spring.
Dearest Elizabeth,
I dared not allow myself to hope that you would ever utter those wishes to me again, even though I longed for it.
then am I to hope that you love me?
I do.
Oh, my dearest Lizzy. I believe I'm indebted to my aunt for our good understanding.
Lady Catherine.
When you refused to make the promise she asked of you, it taught me to hope as I'd scarcely ever allowed myself to hope before. I knew enough of your disposition to be certain that if you'd absolutely decided against me, you would have acknowledged it to Lady Catherine, frankly and openly.
Yes, you know me well. After abusing you so abominably to your face, I could have no scruple in abusing you to all your relations.
What did you say of me that I did not deserve? My behaviour to you at the time was unpardonable. I shall never forget what you said. Had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner? Those were your words. And the turn of your countenance I shall never forget, as you said that I could not have addressed you in any possible way that would induce you to accept me.
Oh, do not repeat what I then said. These recollections will not do at all. I assure you that I have long been most heartedly ashamed of them.
I've been a selfish being all my life. In practice, though not in principle. Such I was from 8 to 28, and such I might still have been but for you. Oh, my dearest, loveliest Elizabeth, what do I not owe you? By you I was properly humbled. I came to you without doubt of my reception. What will you think of my vanity? I believed you to be wishing, expecting my addresses.
How you must have hated me after that evening.
Hate you? I was angry, perhaps, at first, but my anger soon began to take a proper direction.
I am almost afraid of asking what you thought of me when we met at Pemberley.
I felt nothing but surprise. My object then was to show you by every civility in my power that I was not so mean as to resent the past, and I hoped to obtain your forgiveness.
Now, there is something pressing I must discover. How can you account for your first falling in love with me? I can comprehend your going on charmingly when you had once made a beginning, but what could set you off in the first place?
I cannot fix on the hour, or the spot, or the look, or the words which laid the foundation. It is too long ago. I was in the middle before I knew I had begun.
Now, be sincere. Did you admire me for my impertinence?
For the liveliness of your mind, I did.
You may as well call it impertinence at once. It was very little less. To be sure, you knew no actual good of me.
Was there no good in your affectionate behaviour to Jane, while she was ill at Netherfield?
Dearest Jane, who could have done less for her? But make a virtue of it by all means. My good qualities are under your protection, and you are to exaggerate them as much as possible.
They need no exaggeration.
What made you so shy of me when you called with Bingley? You barely said a word.
Because you were grave and silent, and gave me no encouragement.
But I was embarrassed.
And so was I.
You might have talked to me more when you came to dinner.
A man who had felt less might.
But I wonder how long you would have gone on. I wonder when you would have spoken if I had not asked you. My resolution of thanking you for your kindness to Lydia had certainly great effect. Too much, I am afraid. What becomes of the moral if our comfort springs from a breach of promise? For I ought not to have mentioned the subject. This will never do.
You need not distress yourself. Lady Catherine's unjustifiable endeavours to separate us were the means of removing all my doubts. My aunt's intelligence had given me hope, and I was determined at once to know everything.
Lady Catherine has been of infinite use, which ought to make her happy, for she loves to be of use. But tell me, what did you come down to Netherfield for? Was it merely to ride to Longbourn and be embarrassed?
My avowed reason, or what I avowed to myself, was to see whether your sister were still partial to Bingley, and, if she were, to make the confession to him which I believe I ought to have made long ago. My real purpose was to see you, and to judge whether I might ever hope to make you love me.
But you were surprised by Mr Bingley's proposal?
Not at all. When I went away, I felt it would soon happen.
That is to say, you had given your permission.
Oh, permission? I told him that I believed myself mistaken in supposing your sister was indifferent to him, and I felt no doubt of their happiness together. He's heartily forgiven me now. But what could have become of Bingley and Jane? How long must we have been walking? We must return to Longbourn, and I must speak with your father.
In the evening, soon after Mr Bennet withdrew to the library, Elizabeth saw Mr Darcy follow him. She did not fear her father's opposition, but he was going to be made unhappy, and that it should be through her means, that she, his favourite child, should be distressing him by her choice, should be filling him with fears and regrets in disposing of her, was a wretched reflection, and she sat in misery till Mr Darcy appeared again, when, looking at him, she was a little relieved by his smile.
Go to your father. He wants you in the library.
Come.
You wish to see me, Papa?
Lizzy, shut the door. Are you out of your senses to be accepting this man? Have not you always hated him?
Perhaps once, Papa. But since making his better acquaintance, I have grown quite attached to Mr Darcy.
Or in other words, you are determined to have him. He is rich, to be sure, and you may have more fine clothes and fine carriages than Jane. But will they make you happy?
Have you any other objection than your belief of my indifference?
None at all. We all know him to be a proud, unpleasant sort of man. And this would be nothing if you really liked him.
I do. I do like him. I love him. Indeed, he has no improper pride. He is perfectly amiable.
Lizzy, I have given him my consent. He is the kind of man indeed to whom I should never dare refuse anything. I now give it to you, if you are resolved on having him. I know your disposition, Lizzy. I know you could not be happy unless you truly esteemed your husband. My child, let me not have the grief of seeing you unable to respect your partner in life.
Oh, Papa, he truly is the man I wish to marry. The gradual change in which my estimation of him has undergone is owing in no little part to my better understanding of him, of learning of his compassionate and generous nature. I truly love him, Papa.
Well, my dear, I have no more to say. If this be the case, he deserves you. I could not have parted with you, my Lizzy, to anyone less worthy.
He is worthy, Papa. Indeed, it was he who paid off Wickham's debts. He saved Lydia, Papa.
This is an evening of wonders indeed. And so Darcy did everything?
Yes. He bought Wickham his commission and gave up the money to ensure the match.
Oh, Lizzy, so much the better. It will save me a world of trouble and economy. Had it been your uncle's doing, I must and would have paid him. But these violent young lovers carry everything their own way. I shall offer to pay him tomorrow. He will rant and storm about his love for you, and there will be an end of the matter. Oh, no wonder of your reaction to Mr. Collins's letter. Oh, my dear, dear Lizzy, I shall leave it to you to tell your mother. And if any young men come for Mary or Kitty, send them in, for I am quite at leisure.
And is it really true? Oh, my sweetest Lizzy! How rich and how great you will be. Oh, such a charming man. So handsome, so tall. Oh, my dear Lizzy. Oh, pray apologise for my having disliked him so much before. 3 daughters married. 10,000 a year. Oh, Lord, what will become of me? I shall go distracted. I must tell Lady Lucas at once.
No, you are joking, Lizzy. This cannot be. Engaged to Mr. Darcy? No, you shall not deceive me. Oh, Lizzy, it cannot be. I know how much you dislike him.
That is all to be forgot. Perhaps I did not always love him so well as I do now.
Oh, good heaven, can it be really so? My dear Lizzy, are you quite certain that you can be happy with him?
There can be no doubt of that. It is settled between us already that we are to be the happiest couple in the world. But are you pleased, Jane? Should you like to have such a brother?
Oh, very, very much. Oh, nothing could give either Bingley or myself more delight. And you do really love him quite well enough. Are you quite sure you feel what you ought to do?
Oh, yes. You will only think I feel more than I ought to do when I tell you all.
What do you mean?
Why, I must confess that I love him better than I do Bingley. I am afraid you will be angry.
Oh, my dearest sister, now be serious. Oh, I want to talk very seriously. Let me know everything I am to know, without delay. Or will you tell me how long you have loved him?
It has been coming on so gradually that I hardly know when it began. But I believe I must date it from my first seeing his beautiful grounds at Pemberley.
Happy for all her maternal feelings was the day on which Mrs. Bennet got rid of her 2 most deserving daughters. With what delighted pride she afterwards visited Mrs. Bingley and talked of Mrs. Darcy may be guessed. Mr. Bingley and Jane remained at Netherfield only a 12-month, before discovering it was indeed possible to be settled too close to one's family. He bought an estate in a neighbouring county to Derbyshire, and Jane and Elizabeth, in addition to every other source of happiness, were within 30 miles of each other.
Georgiana tells me that she is astonished by the way you converse with me in such a teasing and lively manner.
Well, Mr. Darcy, she must begin to comprehend that a wife may take liberties when talking to her husband, which a brother will not always allow of a sister.
I'm glad you two love each other so well as you do.
It is exactly as we hoped it would be. And she is a wonderful influence on Kitty. My sister is so much improved upon their acquaintance. I may almost consider her sensible at times.
I agree. Even the Wickhams' frequent visits with Jane and Bingley do not seem to have affected her. You do not think to have Lydia here again so soon, I hope?
Not for some time, I think. I know you do not approve of her visits, and I heartily support your insistence of his never entering Pemberley. But it does give me some relief to occasionally permit her to stay while Wickham is off in London or Bath.
Perhaps we may invite your aunt and Uncle Gardiner for Michaelmas.
Oh, they should be delighted, I'm sure. And perhaps your aunt could join us for Christmas.
I may have forgiven Lady Catherine, at your insistence, for the way she spoke of you, but that does not mean I wish to seek her company. Now, Mrs. Darcy, should we take a turn about the park?
Do you think, Mr. Darcy, it is handsome enough to tempt me?
I dare say you'll find it tolerable.
Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen was adapted and directed by Rebecca Cockcroft for White Cobra. This production was recorded separately in the performance homes to adhere to COVID regulations. Find out more about White Cobra by visiting whitecobra.co.uk. The narrator was Liz Clarke. Mrs Bennet was Kate Billingham, and Mr Bennet was John Myhill. Lizzy Bennet was Amy Whitestone, Kitty Bennet was Corinna Jane Crabtree, and Jane Bennet was Rebecca Cockcroft. Lydia Wickham was Emily Rose Lyon, Mr Wickham was Tristan Baxter Smith, and Mrs Gardner was Mo Shapiro. The Longbourn servant was Rebecca Cockcroft, Mr Bingley was Thomas Sparrow, Mr Darcy was Tom Moreth, and Lady Catherine de Bourgh was Lynn O'Sullivan.